and thank you for attending this evening. My name is Elliot Perry, and I come wearing many hats. One, I'm a former NBA player. I'm worthy owner of the Memphis Grizzlies, along with a couple of other people in this room, Pitt High, and my former teammate Anthony Hardaway. Chair of the Grizzlies Foundation, where we've decided to use sports to shape young men by mentoring them and helping them gain a different perspective by using our experiences. And also a member of the National Civil Rights Museum Board. And there was a man that walked right across the picture in Ernest Wither's photograph. And that man gazing into the camera was my grandfather. And 1 year later to the day, March 28, 1969, I was born. And I remember in the late 70s, I would take the pilgrimage from Mason Temple to the National Civil Rights Museum on April 4th. Being a young kid, I never understood why. And so I asked my grandfather one day, and a man with a 4th or 5th grade education, nothing in academics, he said, son, when your turn comes, you just do your part. And so with that, I've always tried to give my time, my talent, and my treasures. But more importantly, most of you are doing the same thing. And I want to personally say that I appreciate all of your time, all of your talents, and all of your treasures that you give, helping shape our communities all across this nation. So thank you for that. It is also my pleasure to introduce Michelle Roberts, the Executive Director of the NBA Players Association. Ms. Roberts is the first woman to head a major professional sports union in North America. We're talking about breaking down boundaries. In her role, she is the primary advocate for all players, ensuring the protection of its membership, including serving as the lead negotiator in all collective bargaining activities. Prior to that, she was a renowned trial lawyer. I think I've heard it said that she was the finest pure trial lawyer in Washington, D.C. What a tremendous accomplishment. But before I hand the mic over to Ms. Roberts, and thank you for being here, Ms. Roberts, I would like to acknowledge a very generous gift to the National Civil Rights Museum in honor of MLK50. A gift collectively made by the NBA Players Association, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Memphis Grizzlies. A $100,000 donation. So for that, we are truly grateful on behalf of the board of the National Civil Rights Museum and its staff and our community. Thank you, Commissioner Silk. Thank you, Jeannie Buss of the Los Angeles Lakers, Jason Wechter of the Memphis Grizzlies, and also Michelle Roberts of the NBPA for your contribution. So please help me welcome Michelle Roberts to the stage.
Thank you, and I will be brief because that's kind of my MO. Let me say that it is a rule that I go by. My rule is that I never, ever give off any potential information about how old I am in public. But I'm going to break that rule today because unlike Elliot, and I think most of the people in this room, I was actually alive when Martin Luther King was killed. In fact, I remember that day fairly vividly. I was in my apartment in New York, and the apartment that I grew up in with my family. One of my mother's best friends lived in one of the apartments on the same floor. Her name was Miss Dolores. And I remember that night, Miss Dolores came to our apartment. She was banging on the door. And when my mom let her in, it was clear that Miss Dolores was unbelievably upset about something. And she said to my mother, she said, Elsie, they killed him. And my mother said, killed who? And I remember she said, Miss Dolores said 2 words. She said, Dr. King. Now, my mother was, I'll describe her as a fairly stoic woman. She rarely showed raw emotions. But I remember that night, after Ms. Dolores said, "Dr. King," I saw in my mother something I had not ever seen before. She said, word to the effect, "Jesus, no." And then she started to sob. I was 11 or 12, I think it was 12 at that time, and I remember being terrified. And it wasn't because Dr. King had been killed, because I'll be honest and tell you, at that time, I did not know much about Dr. King. We didn't have a Black History Month back then. We didn't have Black Studies in our schools. I had a passing knowledge that there was this guy, this reverend in the South that my mom seemed to think was important. So I wasn't frightened because he had been killed. What frightened me was I did not know who this man was that had evoked such an incredible reaction from my mother, a reaction I'd never seen. And at that moment, I made it my business to learn everything and anything I could about him. It wasn't long when I came to realize why my mother and why Miss Dolores was so heartbroken about his killing. Because I learned how much of a contribution he had made to our community. Being on that balcony today was kind of tough for me. But I'm glad I came, because as we all know, that's hallowed ground. And as I was standing there, I was wishing I could just pray and thank Dr. King and let him know that the world is perfect because of his contribution and the contribution of so many others. But that's not a prayer we can indulge in these days. We've come a long way, but we have such a long way to go. So let's get started. And let's get started with the aptly entitled panel, MLK50. Where do we go from here? Take it away.
As a member of the museum board, I am proud of what we get done here on a daily basis. And we can credit that to our president, Terry Freedman. In 2014, Terry took over the reins of the National Civil Rights Museum to help us refocus, reshape, and take us to our next iteration of what the museum is about. Prior to that, for 18 years, Ms. Freedman served as the president of the Community Foundation in Washington, D.C., the largest funder of nonprofit organizations in the metropolitan area. In that position, she distinguished herself for her community building, her leadership on critical issues to improve our community. And also, she increased the foundation's assets from $52 million to over $350 million. But at the National Civil Rights Museum, she has served as a catalyst for taking us into our next iteration, like I said before, shaping the idea of where do we go from here. We realized what happened. We know what's happening now. Now where do we go from here? By leading tremendous conversations and taking the organization outside in, and then bringing in some of the most tough, and having some of the most toughest conversations right here in this building. Not just about social issues, race and religion, but also about gender, about jobs, and about police brutality. And that we've never had. So thank you, Terry, for leading this museum, and we are so proud to have you as our president. Help me welcome Terry Freedman.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's good to see everyone out there. Now, I'm going to try not to squint and not look in these lights. And to our panelists, I'm sorry, Mike, that I'm behind you. So just you can glance back and then you can pay attention to the audience when I ask you a question. We are thrilled to have you here. Thank you, Elliot, for that very generous introduction. And let me echo Elliot in thanking you for that incredible gift to the National Civil Rights Museum. It always means a lot, but in this 50th year, it is that much more important that we are able to continue not to focus on what happened on April 4th, 1968, but to talk about the legacy that was left, and frankly, the work that we have to do. So let me just say that we are pleased to partner with the Grizzlies to host this forum, an opportunity to talk about the intersection of race, sport, and social justice. In his 10th NBA season, Mike Conley Jr. has emerged as one of the premier point guards in the NBA with an impressive list of accomplishments. Early in the 2016-17 season, Conley Jr. became the Grizzlies' all-time leader in points, assists, and steals. Not only does he excel on the court, Mike is a role model off the court, taking home the NBA Sportsmanship Award in 2014 and the NBA Community Assist Award in January 2016. Mike's generosity and his dedication to creating access to opportunity through philanthropy make him a thoughtful voice on issues of social justice. A native of Indiana, he is all Memphian now. Mike Conley. Seated next to Mike is Swin Cash. Swin is a 5-time WNBA All-Star, 2-time WNBA All-Star MVP, and 3-time WNBA champion, or as I like to call her, a boss. Basically, King says to us to continue to fight for justice and equity for all. Be concerned with a growing wealth gap. Be concerned with separate and unequal educational opportunities. Be concerned when diversity is seen as more of a detriment than an asset. So, with that, I asked our panelists to think about that question. And Swin, I'd like to start with you. Do Dr. King's words, you're a boss, so you can handle it. Do Dr. King's words ring true to you, and how satisfied or not are you with our progress?
Oh, that's a really good question. This is words ring true, absolutely. Since I was a little girl, I can recall my grandmother, who grew up in the civil rights movement, always speaking about Dr. King and about what my cousins and I could be, or what we would have in life. And she was constantly pouring into us. She was constantly praying for us and believing that our country, our world will be a better place for my cousins and I. And I still believe that. I still believe that there are people that do the work every day who want to see the complete dream of Dr. King fulfilled. But are we there yet? Absolutely not. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, it is a constant work in progress. It's like organically always shifting and changing, understanding where the goal is, but sometimes the goalpost is moving on us. And we have to be strong enough and use our voice enough, use our vote enough to try to get to that end place, that ultimate goal that I think everyone in this room really wants. But like I said, we're not there yet. It's a work in progress, and the question, I guess to answer the question of how we're going to get there, it's what every single person in this room doing their part in their neighborhood to create a change. And I truly believe that we can one day, and if we don't have hope, then what do we really have?
Mike, let me ask you the same question. Do you think that Dr. King's words ring true, and how satisfied or not are you with the progress?
Well, I agree with Swin. I think his words do ring true. As far as being dissatisfied, I think none of us are satisfied with the state we're in today. Sorry, I look over you like this. Kind of hard. Suit's kind of tight. Yeah, I'll look for it. But, you know, in all honesty, I saw a stat the other day that said, 1% of the world's population has more wealth than the other 99%. And when you think of things like that, it blows your mind completely. how can we be living in a world satisfied with our daily life when you have the majority of the world living in a state that is not satisfactory. And when you think about here in Memphis, child poverty rates are high, unemployment's high. All these things are still a problem, still an issue today. And it's been 50 years since Dr. King gave his speech and did what he did here in Memphis. So it's nothing to be satisfied about. A lot of work to be done. But like Swin alluded to, it's all of our responsibility. Especially us in positions that we are in, the platform that we have, to try to make a stand and make change and be, activists in the same sense.
Brook, what about your thoughts on that same question?
Yeah, I agree completely. Obviously, if you look in society today or at the news today, Dr. King's words are relevant as they ever have been. If not more, honestly. It's truly amazing to look back at the time he was in and see how his words still affect us today in 2018. And, you just kind of have to take a look and like Swin said, the goalposts may have moved. It's very true that it might not be the exact same conditions, but we're still fighting the same overall issue. And a lot of that, again, like Mike said, takes into account people who have access and people who are in fortunate positions to giving back to their community, and not just through philanthropy or money, but really going back into the community and actually taking accountability. It's not about just sitting up here and having a dialogue, but really taking the fact that I can do my part, Mike can do his part, someone can do her part, and for every person in this room, standing up and being accountable.
Okay, thank you. We're at a higher level of PTSD. And so when we think about what our veterans experience, we have people in our communities who are experiencing that on a daily basis as well. We're going to come back and have you talk a little bit more about economic equity. But Brook, I wanted you to talk a little bit about education. King talks about the lack of access to quality education. Those were his words, not mine, for all students. Many young people view athletics as their way out and up. But can you talk about the importance of athletics in creating or providing access to education?
Yeah, I can obviously speak to my personal experience. Growing up in my family, there are 4 of us boys, four big boys, athletically inclined. But, with my mom raising us as she was a single mom, a public teacher, raising us all on her salary. She put books first every time, and she worked her way to graduating from Stanford. She went to Stanford, and so from very young it was instilled in us that we need an education if we wanted to do anything or amount to anything. And so with her inspiration and her guidance and, each of us brothers looking out for each other as well, we were able to get to where we needed to go. I should say, get through high school, get to Stanford, and become what we are today. But what I'm getting at is that foundation I had, that family foundation I had, was so key to me and so key to my experience. And when you look at a lot of situations that we spoke upon, it's having that sort of safety net, those people you can go to, and realizing that they're there for you, and then having that accessibility. Obviously I was able to reach out to my mom whenever I needed to, and she really looked out for me and was a huge role model in what I did.
Swin, I know that you have Cash for Kids and you really focus on fitness and leadership development. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at athletics and it's providing a path for education?
Yeah, and I want to also add something to what Brook was saying and just kind of make it more of a reality for everybody that's in here. With the kids that I work with in my organization, we have kids that are athletically inclined, and you look at them and some AAU coach probably walk up and be like, you are the next Mike Conley, you were the ex-Brook Lopez. And that's how they look at these kids sometimes. But I look at these kids and I talk to them about basketball and about sports and about using the game and not letting the game use you. And what do I mean by that? Basketball has afforded me to be where I am today. Basketball helped me get a scholarship to the University of Connecticut because I was bouncing that ball every single day, thinking about how am I getting out of public housing, how am I having a better life. And I knew that I could dribble the ball, I knew that I could do things with the ball that other people couldn't do, and somebody was going to give me a free education. And so when I speak to kids, I meet them where they are. And a lot of times kids need to know, not that you're just going to give them money, but you're going to help them have a tool that's going to make their life better. And so a lot of times people just throw money at things, and you don't realize you're throwing money to go buy jerseys and for them to play basketball, but are you teaching them something while playing basketball? And that's the fact that I love with Cash for Kids, that I can walk into a gym now and we just partner with the recreation center where I grew up at in public housing, because I wanted to have a place where some of the kids that we work with who aren't getting a meal at night and have to get up to go to school the next day, that I could figure out a way to say, you know what, we could open up the gym and have basketball, but I know that there's a way I can give these kids a free meal somehow. And those are the things that I constantly think about, is how can we make their life better so that they can go to school and want to study and be focused. Teachers get mad sometimes with kids and don't realize that their stomach's hurting because they don't have food in them. But you know, they go to gym class and they don't have enough energy to run around because they're hungry. So these are the realities of things that we have to deal with. But I think using sports is a way to get kids sometimes in the door. And once they're in the door, we teach them all the other things that they need to know to try to help them better their life.
Do you want to add anything to that, Mike?
I'd like to go before her.
I told you I'm not.
My life, and they were both role models for me. My father was an athlete. He ran track and was in the Olympics, and he instilled in me really at a young age of the process it takes to be great at whatever you want to be at, whether that is education, school, books, track, basketball, whatever it is. And I took it to heart and really didn't want to fail him more than anybody, fail my parents. And that kind of mindset, I think, allowed me to have a different kind of outcome than a lot of other guys who are bigger, faster, stronger, better than me in sports, and smarter than me as well. And thankfully I was just able to have that kind of a foundation, like Brooke was saying, about having a good family atmosphere.
Some say there is a clear normalizing of hate, racism, racial violence, and sexism. This is illustrated by the protest in Charlottesville and the unfortunate pervasiveness of inappropriate and aggressive behavior toward women, as highlighted by the Me Too movement. Do you think we are becoming numb to these issues? Do you think that it actually is being normalized? And Mike, I'm going to let you say.
Nice. I wasn't ready, but racism, hatred, all these things that are occurring today, and we consider numbing or normal. It didn't just become normal for a lot of people in their lives. I think this is something that people have been experiencing for a very long time, unfortunately. And with the events in Charlottesville, for me personally, it was a sad time, a sad day to see something like that going on. Just mainly because I was thinking about the people that came before all of us, all the people who sacrificed, gave the ultimate sacrifice for us to even be on the stage we're at today. And we have a long way to go, but we got here because of people before us, and their dream wasn't to see what was going on in Charlottesville happening. And I know all of us sitting in this room are probably think that same way. I mean, and it was an awful feeling. So it is almost more of a call to action, for me personally. Basically saying we have to stand up now, otherwise we'll be condemning my future generations do the same thing. So.
Brooke, any thoughts on this kind of atmosphere where if you think it, you just say it, if you feel it, you just say it, and the environment in which we find ourselves today?
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate, absolutely unfortunate that it has in a way become normal in that it occurs so regularly now. You see these things being said by people as high up as our president that are just so out of line, and just mind-blowing, frankly, that you see it happen so often that people see that, and it's coming from people like our head of state, and it seems okay in that regard. And it does create that sense of normalizing, and I think Mike's comment about it being a sort of call to arms is definitely such an obvious silver lining of that, is people standing up and saying, no, this isn't right. We have to use our platform to take a stance. And for instance, I think you can look at the counter protests in Charlottesville, in peaceful protests in general, in the vein of Gandhi and Dr. King, peaceful protests that don't use hateful rhetoric, that want to come to that understanding of equality, a true equality, and again, just understanding one another.
So Marc, there is an attitude sometimes that you have to fight fire with fire. But what kinds of resistance to this type of, I call it ignorance and rhetoric, bring you optimism?
I think it's what Brooke said. When you think about how people are responding, how people are standing up in ways that are unifying, in ways that are peaceful, in ways that are loving, in ways that really uphold our values, that to me is what is inspirational. It's that response to the racism, to the patriarchy, to the misogyny, that I think is really going to be what takes us into the future. The big challenge is we have to be able to expose these atrocities in ways that not only call them out for what they are, but pull people into a way of being with one another so that we can move forward in a united fashion. And it's very, very difficult to do that. I struggle with it myself because I'm quick to identify someone or something as the enemy, and to not approach the situation with an embrace or greater understanding that a lot of what Dr. King talked about in his speeches was about love and the beloved community. Understood that racism was a disease and it infected everyone, and there were a lot of people who were benefiting from it, but at the same time he saw people as being sick and wanting to heal them and cure them. And that's a big man, because it's so very easy to fall into a space where you are catastrophizing and calling people out and, putting them in a space where they are the enemy versus, a potential ally, a potential comrade, someone who can make change with you. I'm not saying all of that to say don't protect yourself, but I do think there is a conversation to be had about how we can reconcile.
So Swin, thinking about that from the perspective of kind of what we've been seeing in the news of late with regard to the misogyny and, in fact, violence on women, what do you think are the ways that we resist this and we move forward?
Well, I think women are just tired of being sick and tired. I think everything that's happening now has just been done for so many years, and usually what women used to do is you would be at work and you would see the new girl or somebody come in and you would pull her to the side to make sure certain things didn't happen to her, and you just kept it amongst yourselves. But my grandma used to always say the boogeyman at some point comes out of the closet. So now America has the boogeyman out of the closet. So what are you going to do about it? And I think it starts with having conversations. I think it starts with changing policy at the workplace. And I think now companies protecting not only women but also men. I mean, women sometimes don't like when I say this, but whenever things start spiraling and it goes all the way in one direction, it's hard because now men don't want to have a conversation and they're scared if I say one thing. You know, I had a friend of mine, and I'll just give this example. I had a friend of mine who said, you know what, I love shoes, and sometimes I compliment a woman at work for her shoes. I'm scared, should I say anything now? And this is a highly intelligent person who takes care of a lot of people's money, and he's like nervous to like ask me that question, but I use that example to say is that we have to start having conversations and understanding how we can change things, but not make everyone so completely uncomfortable, men and women. And I think that's one thing that we can do. Change policies at workplaces, start having conversations so people understand what's acceptable. If you don't know, you should know by now. And if you make that mistake, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences. I think secondly, yes, let's clap for that. All the women here, yeah. And I think secondly, I just want to say that I think we're at a very difficult time that we need to stop sugarcoating things and call them for what they are. A lie is a lie. Racism is racism. Bigotry is bigotry. And I think, and so on and so on. And I say this to say, I just remember being in school. I think we all can remember being in school. In our institutions, whether it was the presidency, whether it was the principal's office, whatever it is, you knew that it held a certain standard that if I got called to the principal's office or I heard something on television, like I could pretty much understand that that was going to be truth to an extent, especially from certain institutions. We're at a place now where it's very difficult for kids. Sometimes you don't want to turn on the television because you don't want all of the lies and misdirections to be poured into your kids. And I think we consistently say to people, especially minorities who are marginalized in so many ways in this country, that we have to be the ones that have to change or help other people who don't like us or like the color of our skin to help them understand us better. And it just becomes a point where we have to start, the people who want to understand or get educated, those are the people that we have to start trying to create change with. And for those people who don't like you, who don't understand you, I'm not saying that you can't love them, you can't pray for them, but you can't consistently keep beating your head up against a brick wall and the change is not happening. So I think we're just at a point where we have to start making some decisions of who are the people in your circle that you want to be around.
And I do think that who are the people in your circle who can be influenced?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think that we do have to all work together. And it's not about necessarily ideology as much as it is about what is leadership and what does leadership mean. And if we think on the ideals of Dr. King and a message that says, you know, hate is too hard, it's too difficult, so we're going to err on the side of love. And so we have to be able to do that. Let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing today. How would you all compare the movement of the past, the 20th century civil rights movement, as I describe it, to the 21st century activism that we are seeing right now? Mike, let's start with you.
Well, I found it interesting just taking the tour today that the movement back in the day, a lot of the people that were involved in it were young, really, really young, 18 to 24, I think was the age group that you saw. I'm be the first to admit I've become more aware and more of a sense to a calling as I've gotten older and more mature. But when I was 18 and 24, I can't tell you if I was thinking about that. You know, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I don't know if that was what I was willing to do or be, willing to sacrifice. And you're talking about back then, people were risking their lives every day. And today, I think you've got a similar type of activist, but like I said, I think it was more of a younger crowd in which they really understood the meaning of what they were trying to go after. When it's more today, you got a lot more, but you know, you got a different age group of people that are more aware of it than I think our young community is.
Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, I have to go back and think about myself when I was learning about the civil rights movement. And, you know, obviously I was a kid at that point, and so these definitely seem like, you know, older gentlemen to me. But looking at them now, and being people younger than, you know, a lot of us up here, is very amazing to me. And I think, like Mike said, you know, you see a lot of older people asserting themselves, and you have the feminist marches and stuff like that. But you see a lot on college campuses too. People really taking the unions they have on campus and coming together, young people coming together and making change on a collegiate level throughout the U.S. as well.
This year, or the end of 2017, the Commercial Appeal named community activists in Memphis as the persons of the year because of what they were able to accomplish. And I think, in actuality, while sometimes it can be hard for us to try to compare the 20th century movement to the 21st century movement, there are so many similarities. Youth being a part of it, and even the methods that are used that are also very similar. So I do see activism as having, it's certainly in full effect is what I would say. Mark?
Yes, just to add to this, because, you know, I think there are, as you say, a lot of similarities. You look at the demands that Dr. King was making through the Poor People's Campaign, and which are very similar to what the Black Panthers were asking for as part of their 10-point platform. And you contrast that to today, I mean, those things are still very, very relevant. And in fact, Reverend Barber is launching a Poor People's Campaign that is asking for all the same stuff. But when I think about all the distinctions, I think young people have so many more distractions these days. I think there's so much pulling a young person in any given direction at any time. I think it makes it hard for them to be focused on the most salient issues of the day. I think technology has definitely changed the way that we talk about movements in the same way that the television kind of played a role in the civil rights movement. I feel like we're in the Twitterverse now, and you know, you have to work hard to avoid it. You know, it's like, you know, and not being on Twitter is you kind of shun. It's a weird thing where, you know, movements are kind of captured in that space within 140 characters. And then when I think about another distinction, I think about the professionalization of the movement. And back then in the civil rights movement, you know, people were doing this, you know, kind of voluntarily. You know, they were, you know, taking time off of their jobs. They were doing things after work or before work. Now it's actually a profession to be an advocate, to be an organizer, and that's the kind of infrastructure and that just wasn't present back then. And so I think now there's so much more capacity. It's hard to know what to do with it, but I think that presents a really unique opportunity for us as we think about how to really get what we want from the perspective of, you know, creating a more just and equitable society.
So you, sure.
A couple of things that I noticed about that as well is, I think social media, and you talked about Twitter, but not only Twitter, I think Facebook.
All of my questions.
Oh, sorry.
I've already had to flip because Mark answered the question that I didn't ask.
I'll let you go. I was just going to say that one of the things that I noticed is, obviously I'm not as young as Brooke and Mike, but I'm not old either. I'm seasoned, as women like to say. But I've noticed that my kind of generation, and even into millennials now, that social media is how they mobilize. And it's not just only Twitter, it's also Facebook. You have certain groups. I think that is where a lot of the power lies for them. Whereas it's not only just finding out stuff here in our country. If something's happening overseas, immediately you're finding out about it. Groups are talking about it. Even when the Women's March happened, you started seeing the Women's March that was happening in London and in different countries. I mean, that's powerful stuff to be able to do that. I think back to Dr. King and back then the Civil Rights Movement, if they had just that access, his voice alone, people were just kind of captivated by it, and his speeches, I mean, to be able to project that out, just think about how much more change could have occurred. So that's what I think about there. And I think the other thing for me too is women. We think about women from the Civil Rights Movement, and even young women now that are kind of taking their place and having certain platforms. They're starting to make a change. I was blessed enough to spend a lunch with Dr. Dorothy Height when I was in DC before, God rest her soul, she passed away. And it was amazing to just learn some of the things from back then that women, we were standing behind, trying to support the voice of the different men that were coming forth throughout the movement. Whereas now women are saying, no, we're going to mobilize together and be able to get an agenda. So, I mean, I think that's very fascinating.
So I'm going to ask my question anyway. Black Lives Matter actually began as a hashtag, right? And it was a hashtag that was formed by 3 African American women. And it grew into a very powerful political force. My question was, and you touched on it, but I want you all to touch on the other side too. Social media, how does it impact activism on the positive side and or the negative side? So, Mike, let me go to you on that.
Well, I think social media as a whole can be very powerful, like we all just alluded to, especially towards this subject. And you given the fact that you can have access to so much knowledge, so much news across the world, you are aware of things a lot quicker, and it allows you to be, I would say, I guess it allows you to be up to date, allows you to connect with others quicker, it allows you to put yourself in different places that you want to be involved in, whether it be in your city. Twitter works in small communities still. Even in Memphis, you can use Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and you can meet at a place and you can have a march. You can, go on strike. You can do all these things basically off of a social media platform, and thankfully enough we have that. And at the same time, social media isn't all good, and we know that. There's so many things that why social media is dangerous. For all other reasons. That's how, a lot of the terrorists and all the other things, they communicate and do things through these kind of forms too, and domestically as well. I mean, it's not all, rose-colored lenses, but I look at the positive in it, and I think that, social media can really be even utilized even more.
I definitely think the positives outweigh the negatives. Obviously, like Mike said, that there's a lot of negatives. Obviously, in comment sections, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever, people spewing hate and fear-mongering and all sorts of things in comment sections. It's very depressing, disappointing stuff, and it really makes really paints a dark face on things. It makes things look bleak. But then you see a lot of positive things as well. It definitely raises awareness. It brings you up to date on news, and like Mike said, just setting up marches, setting up whatever sort of protests you may want to set up, and just bringing people together, and people can realize out there, hey, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in believing this. There's other people like me, and obviously we're strongest when we're together.
It is interesting when you do kind of compare and contrast the fact that King used television, which was the new medium, and how effectively he did use that medium. So as you say, if he had social media at his disposal, what would it have looked like from there? Let me ask about the idea of defining characteristics of movements today. You all have just toured the museum, and You know the issues that were presented that created the movement of yesteryear. What do you think are the defining characteristics, and how can leaders in this room participate? Marc, let me ask that to you.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that strikes me about movements is that everyone participates. When you're in a movement, when you're in a movement moment, everyone has a pathway to being engaged. Someone can tweet, someone can protest, someone can, boycott. Everyone can participate, and I think that really is the defining characteristic of a movement, is that everyone is engaged in a way that is furthering the shared goal. When I think about the tour we just went on, to me, that was one of the things that stood out. Everyday people were contributing in ways that were small but really powerful, that were all in alignment with the goal, the objective, and that's, to me, the high water mark. We haven't been able to recreate that in many instances, and I think that when we are thinking about the next iteration of the civil rights movement, or where we go from here, we have to create a condition that allows for everybody to engage.
And so, Swin, how do you think we can effectively engage millennials as advocates and activists in this fight for social justice?
Well, one thing I think is to corner them on history. A lot of times, there's so many, like you said, distractions, things that can happen, and millennials work hard, and I think by letting them know what the past was like and how they could play a part in the future, and hear them. A lot of times we're trying to talk down and talk to them instead of getting ideas and bringing them in as part of the conversation. I'm a big believer in people having dialogue. I think across race, economics, everything. I think because we learn so much. For me, one of my closest friends, Sue Bird, I played with her, we roomed together in college. We learned so much about each other coming from two completely different worlds. And I mean that literally, whereas she didn't realize kind of my upbringing and what it was truly like until we started talking and forced into that being roommates in college and learning how to break bread and talk to each other about upbringings and about life, what we want. And she came to see my son, and we were sitting there and we started talking about what's happening in the world and friends of ours and people we needed to connect with and how we could make change and why we needed to stay up on the news and things that were happening. And I think that's how you do it. You start having those conversations in your home, start having them with millennials, people in your neighborhood, and then you go out and everybody else starts planting seeds. That's the way we can make a huge impact. We have people like on this panel that they have bigger platforms, but every single person in here has a small platform that you can use, whether it's in your family or in your neighborhood.
You know, millennials are actually getting kind of old now. So we really do have to focus on, I think it's called Gen Z, for obvious reasons, and what the possibilities are now. Because frankly, the issue of economic equity is an urgent one.
It is.
And so how would you compare the two?
Yes, so, 67, 68 was when the first one was being organized. And shortly after Dr. King was assassinated, it kind of petered out. I think it was around for another year and then petered out. And then what you see is a great backlash to that in the ensuing years with, trickle-down economics and the deepening of urban poverty, outbursts that we're seeing all over the country that are in opposition to that movement, but I think those are the last gasp. And I really feel like we're at a moment where there's energy and momentum moving in a direction of, a more just society. And so this campaign, I think, is going to endure in a way that is transformative. I think about the work our organization has done for 20 years. We've been defining what equity is and forcefully advocating for that across the country. People are hungry for it. Our conferences in April in Chicago were sold out 3 months in advance because people are eager to engage and to have a conversation. And so I think that the difference will be that people will rise up like never before, and that will stand united in a way that I think really takes us in a direction that is decidedly different from where we are now. Because you're right, the issue of economic equity is an urgent one. We've had a disastrous tax bill passed, which will do nothing but make it harder for everybody ultimately, deepen our entire country's debt, and really tilt the scales towards the 1%. And so I think that people are seeing that and are actively calling it out and wanting to join arms and create an alternate future.
Okay. I want to move to philanthropy. Mike, let me start with you.
Yeah, well, I definitely, as an athlete, with the platform that we have, I think that you first start giving your time, your money, into different charities, and you get involved in different things, and then you realize that your money isn't all that's going to help the cause that you're doing, that you're involved in, and the more and more you're in the neighborhoods, building homes, you're out in playgrounds, helping build playgrounds for communities, and you realize all of a sudden that you are actively taking part in change for a smaller portion, for your micro economy, your communities. You're making a difference. For me, I donated $1 million to the Grizzlies Foundation when I signed my contract two summers ago, and part to a mentorship program in which allows all kids who need one or want a mentor the opportunity to have one. And ultimately, I just wanted to try to bridge that gap that we have right now, because I feel that mentors are very, very much a necessity to get you on a path of success in order to achieve whatever goal you want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, well, Mike said mentors, and I know I keep coming back to my mom, but she's the reason I'm here today. I mean, she's that foundation I talk about, and is everything to me. But growing up for me, she allowed me to not just do basketball because I was tall, but try everything, be creative. She enticed me to read a lot, draw, write, and just be a creative person. And so I tried to give that same sort of idea back to the community in Fresno, where I'm from. And so you mentioned growing up, I was part of the Police Athletic League in Fresno. It was a very special place in my heart for me. It took place in West Fresno, which is a less privileged area in Fresno. And so I try to go back every year and give backpacks out to the students full of school supplies, reading, writing utensils, and do book drives as well, where we give kids books and try to help build that foundation of creativity where they can find, like, maybe their foundation, scholarship and scholastic achievement isn't in athletics, but in some creative endeavor where they can get a scholarship, like I said, in some writing or artistic endeavor, whatever it may be. They have that foundation and they have that chance to go out there and find that creative desire, whatever it may be.
So, you spoke of, and I'm going to tell you, every mother in this room is saying, I sure hope my child gets on stage one day and says, they are who they are because of who I was and what I did for them. So your mother should be very proud. But, I think sometimes mentorship, mentoring kind of gets this kind of bad rap because people think, oh, well, you just go volunteer an hour. But each of us in this room had a mentor. Maybe we didn't call them that, but there was somebody in our life that made a huge difference to us. And so I think it's very commendable to invest in mentorship and have someone who is committed to a child because, let's face facts. We hope that young people will be around to pay for us to be able to survive in the future, right? So I think that is very commendable. Swin, can you talk a little bit maybe about your philanthropic efforts as well?
Yeah, so I look at the things that I do from a philanthropy standpoint, from a two-pronged. I love the things that I do with the NBA and NBA Cares. Just having an opportunity to kind of travel not only around the country but around the world and be able to use the sport of basketball to embrace young people, to get their ideas, their creativity, and letting them know there are opportunities, not just playing the game, but also behind the scenes. And I've been able to take some of those key learnings from those opportunities to my own nonprofit with Cash for Kids. And what we try to do is help kids in the neighborhood where I grew up at in Western Pennsylvania, in the Keysport, Pittsburgh area. We try to help the kids through sports. Nowadays, so many sports and activities, these kids have to pay $500 for this, $1,000 for that. Before growing up for me, cut the milk carton open and you put it over there with a basketball, and sometimes that's how we played until we got the hoop back up. And so I try to take away what parents, any excuse that parents have of not signing their kids up or keeping them active. So creating a safe haven through sports is one thing that I've done. And also I created a couple of years ago our cultural trips. And basically what we do is we take the kids out of the neighborhood, and we've taken them to DC, we've taken them to Washington, to DC, we've taken them to New York, and take them on cultural trips where they go to museums. They meet different, whether it's somebody in business, someone in finance, someone in sports, and we introduce them to new people, and we use some of the parents sometimes as volunteers. And I'll never forget taking a mom to DC, and she came knocking on my room door and she was crying, and she just wanted to talk, and I was talking to her, and she said, "This is the first trip that I've ever left out of the neighborhood, and I just thank you and I appreciate it so much." And it was just her first time seeing something else with her child. And for me, I think it's so important because when I was younger, my mom got me involved in sports, and she made me go and travel all these different places for one reason alone, so that I can imagine and I can dream and I can see other places and where I can be. And so I remember at 13 reading about Paris, and at 14 on a basketball traveling team going to Paris, having no clue, like, what is going on. I see black people, but they're speaking a different language, and it's not like me, and what's happening. And it just opened my mind up to the possibilities of what I could be or what I could achieve. And that's what I try to do with my nonprofit, is plant those seeds. And sometimes that seed is just a hug to a kid that can't believe that I'm in the gym right there, and they see these banners up that my mom, for some reason, like you, Brooke, has just put up there, and you're like, "Mom, why are you putting this up there? These kids don't need to know, they need to see me." But yeah, that's what I try to do. Just reach out and just touch somebody.
Well, where do we go from here? Clearly, as the panel has described, we go forward. And we continue to press on to meet the needs, but do it with some urgency, because we frankly don't have another 50 years to try to fix some of the things that aren't sitting right today.